Super Mario 3D Land was released back in 2011 for the 3DS. Coming off of the success of the original DS, it was only smart for Nintendo to create a brand new 3D Mario platformer for their new system. The marketing for this game was heavily focused on the return of the Tanuki suit from Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES, and without this game, the 3DS would have likely flopped as a system due to its absurdly high price point mixed with its lackluster launch titles. The price drop alone with the release of Super Mario 3D Land significantly improved the sales of the 3DS, and it's mainly responsible for the popularity and love this handheld still receives today. Mario 3D Land was the first 3D Mario game to play much like a 2D Mario game, only translated into 3D. This entire game was pretty much the building grounds for the much bigger Super Mario 3D World that would release on the Wii U a few years later. For what it is though, 3D Land offers a great variety of content for the player to explore and discover. Sure, there may be no hub world, as this game is even structured like the 2D games, choosing to use a linear path for its progression rather than an expansive open environment, but in all honesty, I think it suits this game very well, because at the end of the day, it was built in such a way where the player could pick it up and play for an hour at a time, so having this massive hub world would completely go against everything this game stood for. That being said, it is still a lot of fun to play 3D Land in long increments, and each level is fun and creative in its own way. Unlike the previous 2D entries, there is no dedicated grass world or snow world. Rather, each world now has completely different themes per stage, and I think that makes things much more interesting than if they had just stuck with the typical overused tropes from the last entries. Mario games are no slouch when it comes to their musical scores, and 3D Land is no exception. It may not have a grand orchestral soundtrack like the Galaxy games, but there's a great selection of songs here, and I especially love the main theme. Almost every track is original and does a great job at capturing its respective environment and atmosphere. This game really doesn't have much plot, as it's just the same thing we've seen done a million times by this point, with Bowser kidnapping Princess Peach. But as per usual in the Mario franchise, gameplay takes a much greater priority than story elements. I remember that when this game first released, I was a kid and I greatly enjoyed hopping from stage to stage without worrying about the story at all. So while I do think story is important in a video game, when it comes to Mario specifically, I think it does these shorter entries more justice to focus more on the gameplay and perfecting the environments and level design within stages. Just like Super Mario Galaxy 2's prankster comments, 3D Land has its own collectible in the shape of star coins. These function in the same way they did in the 2D games, except now they are required for progression, and you must have a certain amount of these to unlock the final level within each world. There are 3 star coins per stage, and I think they were a great addition because it gives player an incentive to explore each stage while also restricting them from just blowing through each stage without looking back. I'm not a huge fan of when games force the player to collect a certain amount of a specific item in order to progress, but I think it was handled nicely here, because the levels are so short in this game that adding 3 star coins per level was a smart way of Nintendo making sure that the player sees all the worlds have to offer, rather than skipping through everything. The level design in Super Mario 3D Land is perfect for the system it was made for, as every stage perfectly complements the fast-paced nature of the 3DS. This is one of the best 3DS games to play when you're on road trips or sleeping over at a friend's house. Its tight, compact levels allow for a great amount of flexibility in the amount of time you choose to play for. This game is also super charming. As I mentioned earlier, the music perfectly fits into every level it's used in, but not only does it do that, it just sets the stage for a good time here. It's impossible to be upset while playing Mario 3D Land, as the upbeat and bubbly environments mixed with the happy-go-lucky music makes for a great feel-good experience. And I think some of these factors are part of why I remember this game so fondly as a kid. So anyways, just like in New Super Mario Bros. On the DS and Super Mario World, you can use an item in reserve here in Super Mario 3D Land. If you collect a power-up while already using one, that power-up you picked up will go into a slot on the bottom screen of the 3DS. This is such a small yet impactful addition, and while I think it makes the game a bit too easy in the early parts, the later parts of the game such as the special worlds greatly benefit from this reserved item slot because it gives the player a second chance if they happen to need a certain power-up to unlock access to a specific secret or star coin. Speaking of power-ups, you'll find your typical mushroom and fire flower, but on top of that, there's the boomerang suit, which acts as sort of an altered fire flower, and it really does come down to preference on which of these you prefer to use. Personally, I like the fire flower better simply because it has more flexibility in its direction, and you can also shoot fireballs out at a much faster rate than you can throw boomerangs. Lastly, there's the star of the show, the Tanuki suit. This is the big power-up that was marketed with the game, and it works very well for the level design scene here. Many people complain about the fact that you can't actually fly with it like you could in Super Mario Bros. 3, but to be honest, I've always seen that as an arbitrary criticism towards the game. Think about it, if you were able to fly in Super Mario 3D Land's levels, you could completely break the game as you soared through every obstacle thrown your way. As it stands, I think the way it operates now is perfect. The way you can slowly descend upon jumping off a high platform is a great way of floating past tough obstacles without completely breaking the game and its level design, because again, you can only descend and not ascend. This game also marks the first time Boom Boom is seen in 3D, making his return from Super Mario Bros. 3. However, making her debut in the Super Mario series is Pom Pom, and honestly, these aren't the greatest boss fights. Boom Boom is pathetically easy in a 3D space, and if you're quick enough, you can literally defeat him before he even starts any of his attacks. Pom Pom is also very easy, as all she does is teleport around the room very slowly while throwing boomerangs at Mario. She can also be defeated quickly before even starting her attacks. Aside from that though, there are literally no other boss fights in the game except for Bowser, who you actually fight multiple times in this game. However, shortly after fighting him, you'll realize that every Bowser is fake up until the last one, as they all just turn into Goombas, Magikoopas, or some other enemy upon being defeated. Bowser's fights are pretty mediocre, as none of them are even fights at all. Most of them see you evading his attacks while trying to reach the end of the stage, which holds a big button you must step on in order to send him into the lava. This all seems to be one big homage to the original Super Mario Bros., considering the fact that just like in that game, all the Bowsers are fake except for the last one. And you also need to step on a button to defeat him, similar how you run past a giant axe in the original game. Super Mario 3D Land may seem like a very short game on the surface, and while it makes sense that many perceived it that way, that might also be because lots of those same people never played the special worlds in the game. Now I'm only going to touch upon these briefly due to the fact that all of my data containing footage from this part of the game was corrupted with no chance of recovery. But that being said, after you complete the main story of the game, you'll get a letter showing Luigi, who's apparently locked up. And once that's over, you're brought back to the title screen where upon entering your save file you are thrusted into a pipe containing 8 more worlds. This essentially doubles the game in length, so for anyone claiming this game to be short and easy, just wait until you mess around with these levels. Now sure, many of these stages are easy, but once you hit the last few worlds, all of that goes down the drain. These levels can be tough and offer a perfect opportunity for those who completed the main portion of the game and won an extra challenge. You can also unlock Luigi after completing the first of these special worlds. The last major topic I want to touch on is the final Bowser fight. So first off, I think the castle leading up to Bowser is just amazing. The music gives off such a grand yet cautious and dangerous vibe, and pair that with the rather unique start where you ride down this giant skeleton raft, and tons of fireballs being sent your way, and you've got a pretty fun challenge right here. Once you complete the main portion of this stage, you're taken to an outside area which is just so cool, as all the music stops and the only sounds are the ominous drops of the rain pouring onto every object surrounding Mario. The fight against Bowser himself is so cool too. Again, this really isn't a fight and more of a chase sequence, but it's still fun and amusing in its own right. The music here really makes you feel like you've reached the end, as it just fits the whole fight perfectly. It's also really fun to jump around all these crumbling platforms, avoiding Bowser's fireballs, and eventually, he makes a very cool reference to Donkey Kong by throwing barrels at Mario. The final part sees the player running towards the screen on this long platform covered in bricks, which Mario must break while Bowser chases after him. Once you finally get to the end, you'll find your final button to jump on, which defeats Bowser once and for all. And after that exhilarating sequence, it's actually really satisfying to get to climb that flagpole and free the princess, thus ending your journey. In the end, Super Mario 3D Land is a great way to either pass the time or play in long increments. Nintendo perfectly constructed this game to be played to your liking, and it really pays off. I would say if you've never played 3D Land before, you should definitely give it a try, as I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how much variety they managed to stuff into this little package. With enjoyable level design, fun mechanics, and an overall feel-good atmosphere, I think it's safe to say anyone can play and enjoy this game, especially if they love the Mario franchise, and just have fun playing his games in general. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.